afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. My name is Tom Lyons, and I'm the business editor with the Sunday Business Post, which is a national newspaper in Ireland aimed at people who are interested in finance, economics, and tech. And joining me on stage is Siraj Khaliq, who is the co-founder of the Climate Corporation, a company which he sold at the age of 35 for $1.1 billion to Monsanto. Good afternoon, Siraj. Great to have you here. Let's just go to the basics first. If you can just take me through, what was the Climate Corporation?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's a very fair question. I think there's it's very likely most of the people in the audience have not come across our product as a customer. Unless you're a farmer from the Midwest that loves SaaS so much you flew out to Dublin. Show of hands. Just kidding. No, so we're a product. So a San Francisco-based company started in 2006, and we applied data science to the way you grow crops. And in doing so, we built this model that would tell you, as a farmer, what you would need to do to increase your crop yield. Now that's important because we're going to have 10 billion people on this planet by 2050, and because of the way people are eating, we're going to need 70% more food, and that's not going to come from traditional means. We have to use data science and data we're getting out of sensors to try and increase that. So it's really important, and we kind of stumbled into it, and that became our business. And Monsanto realized the value of what we're doing and acquired us for that.
And how did two guys, based in San Francisco, build an exitable business which is of interest to farmers right across America?
Put another way, I had two geeks with no idea, no background in farming, insurance, or finance end up doing this. Short answer is we saw an opportunity, and we wanted to do something big, and we just ended up focusing against our minds on it and did it. I mean, we were at Google at the time. My co-founder David Friedberg and I, and we got the itch. I mean, we joined Google when it was this tiny company of 200 people, and by 2006 it was 6,000 and getting bureaucratic, and we just wanted to do something that was meaningful. Dave used to drive past this bike shop near the Ferry Building in San Francisco, and whenever it rained, it was a bike rental shop. Nobody would rent the guy's bikes, so he'd shut the shop, and we started talking about, well, that's a real economic problem, and there's a lot of dollars attached to this, and we realized there was trillions of dollars attached to the weather. So we launched with a product which was anything but agriculture. If you had weather risk, you could come to our website, price a policy, and for as little as $1, buy yourself an insurance contract to protect you against bad weather.
And Siraj, our chat today, it's focused on the 5 key moves to $1 billion exit. Could you take us through what's the first move?
So there were lots of moves, but I've picked 5 that I think were most instrumental and I think useful to the audience today. So the first move, I guess, was we pivoted twice. So as founders, you hear all the time, you can't do this, it's not going to work. And if you're a good founder, you'll ignore the naysayers and you'll execute and build regardless. Good founders know when to do that. And as you heard from Peter earlier today at Segment, they did that a few times. But what great founders do, like he did, and I guess like what we did, is we kept an eye on adjacent opportunities, and we weren't shy to take advantage. So our 2 pivots specifically were, as I mentioned, we were selling everywhere but ag, and our view was farmers are very slow to adopt new technologies. It's a really hard sales cycle. Ignore ag. There's a lot of weather risk elsewhere, so sell there. And we realized, to use modern terminology, our customer acquisition cost was too high, and our lifetime value was really low. Educating people on weather risk and getting them to want to buy an insurance policy, it just wasn't working. And we got some interesting people. We had a pig farmer who said that, from the Midwest, who said when it's too hot and too humid, my hogs don't want to do it. So he bought a policy, and there was this hairdresser in Texas. They got a lot of foot traffic, but when it rained, then people weren't walking past. So we sold policies to some very interesting individuals, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a business. We didn't have a business, so we had to pivot out of necessity. And then it was kind of difficult because we had to build this agronomic model of how crops respond to the weather. And then our second pivot actually was not out of necessity. It was really us noticing, well, we've built this really cool model, and we're using it for insurance. So we're looking at the output of this model, and it says your yield is going to be this or that, and you're going to be paid out. But what if we could actually tell farmers, you can do this with your inputs. You can apply fertilizer here, but not here, or irrigate here, or choose this kind of seed instead of this kind. When should you plant? All of these things. So we built this farm management platform, which became the basis for this precision agriculture movement now. And it wasn't an easy pivot, I have to say, because the insurance product was working. It was doing well enough that we had our board evenly split down the middle, and it got a little bit heated. They said, don't lose focus, the insurance product is working, but we won them over, and we were acquired for over $1 billion because we were the second kind of product and not just an insurance company. So it was a key move, probably the single biggest one.
So don't always listen to your board.
Yeah. I mean, they're great people, but you have to follow your gut. And focus is important. I'm not saying startups should not focus, but at the same time, you have to keep an eye on adjacent opportunities. And when you see something, if it's good, take it.
And your second move, Siraj, is to do with the market. Can you tell me about that?
So this one's kind of obvious, I suppose, but it bears repeating because we're talking about billion-dollar-plus exits, and it's if you want a big outcome, you have to pick a big problem. And when we were at Google, it's not like we didn't have other ideas, but we waited until we found one that we thought was big before we focused on it. So this, I think, is it's not as obvious as it seems, I guess, because now I'm actually an investor, and the single biggest filter we apply for investments is people who are tackling something that's too small, or they've confused total size of a market with actual addressable market opportunity, and they think it's a big opportunity, but it's not. So yeah, I mean, you've got to focus on something that makes sense if you want to build a really big outcome.
And what's the third move that you described to the audience, Raj?
We let go of people who weren't working out early, even very senior people. And this is one that, you hear this cliche. I think everybody in the room has probably heard this cliche that, A-type people hire A-type people, and B-type people hire C-type people. And yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's important. You should listen to that. But you are going to screw it up multiple times. And we learned with our first senior mishire that it costs you. It costs you in confusion and morale. And it's not that these aren't good people or that they're bad people specifically. It's just they're not great people. And to use an Americanism, on Monday morning when we sat around our table with our executive team, everybody around that table was awesome. And it didn't just happen. We let go of people. We hired a CFO that we let go of 6 months later. That was fast for such a senior hire. But the first time was hard, but then we realized just how important it was. And I guess a corollary there is we also, one of our senior hires, our gut told us not to hire that person. But a lot of people who were close to the company that we respected said, this person is really good, you should hire them. And your gut beats hearsay every time. So listen to what your gut says. But yeah, the other thing, I guess, good people or great people don't come cheap. So don't be penny wise and pound foolish. It was really tough for us to get our heads around spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a headhunter. But even with an amazing network, and my co-founder had a really good one, actually, you're not going to find the chief legal officer you need or the VP of sales you might need. So, pay for headhunters. It's tough, but, swallow your pride and bring in the best people because because you've got one shot, and you don't want to lose because you didn't have the right team.
So be prepared to be tough and incentivize your people to get the right team.
That's right, yep.
And if you're looking at the fourth move, which is to do with finding the right way to get to your customer, can you tell us about that move?
Yeah, so the fourth move, so we became a channel business. So first of all, we had a direct sales business, and as I mentioned, we were selling to farmers. So our main sales guy was this guy, Jeff Hamlin from San Francisco, slim, well-dressed, eloquent.
Oh.
Well, in other words, exactly what you don't want to be to relate to the average American farmer. So needless to say, he didn't sell many policies. He did get a little bit of an uptick when he reassured the farmers by replacing his desktop wallpaper with a picture of his wife and kids. So at least they were reassured of his orientation, which, but despite that, he just didn't sell that many policies, and realized, there's a trust thing. Farmers want to buy from the people they go to church with, from the people who they see all the time. And even if we hired local salespeople, which we tried, we just had to have people there. And as a technologist, you think, well, this is inefficient. You have people you're paying 10% to, and all they're doing is speaking to someone not even that well, perhaps. But the reality is, we wouldn't have had a business without it. So we swallowed our pride. We became a channel business. And of course, once you do it, you got to do it wholeheartedly. So give up your direct sales because otherwise your channel partners are going to be not very incentivized to sell because they'll think you'll cannibalize their business. So it was a key move for us, and one that didn't come easy. I think a lot of SaaS businesses will come face to face with this. Do you sell direct, or is there a channel that makes more sense? And for us, it was very, very important to pick that channel.
And we're coming to the fifth key move now, Siraj. What's the last key point you'd like to make?
So the last key point. So when we ran through 3 rounds of funding, 4 if you include our Series Seed, and we had good investors at those various points. But our Series B, we picked an investor, Khaliq Ventures, that I think wasn't even the second best term sheet that we had on the table. I think they were a good 40 million pre-money valuation below the best term sheet. We still went with them, and we picked them strategically. They weren't the best economically. We'd have more dilution picking them. But we realized that they had the kind of connections politically as well as to possible customers to really help our business out at that stage. So we did the same thing with our Series C. We brought in Founders Fund, which was, again, a very, very key move, because that board discussion I told you about earlier when we had our second pivot, Founders Fund was very long-termist thinking, that makes sense. Even though it's a pivot and the other business is doing well, we support you as founders who want to do this move. Not to say that our earlier investors weren't good, but by very strategically picking our investors and picking them for more than the money, we ended up with a much better outcome. So it was one that I think was key to us. I'm not saying that because I'm now an investor, but think very carefully about who you have, because investors are going to become co-owners of your company, especially if it's early on. They're going to help define the culture of your company, bring you those key early customers, help you land the most important hires. There's so much that comes with bringing in the right investors. So one other thing is, do yourself a favor and don't use a bank. It introduces a third party, erodes trust. If you're doing a Series C, you're raising $100 million plus, then sure, maybe it makes sense. But early on, it's one of those things, like hiring. It's your job as a founder, as a CEO, to spend time with investors, and it's something you can do. It may feel like it's distracting you from the core product, or it kind of is sapping away time, but it really pays off in the long term. So you focus on establishing those relationships and building them, and then bringing in the right investor.
And Siraj, you built the Climate Corporation between the ages of 28 and 35. How did you know that it was the right time to sell? Was that a planned move, or was it more reactive?
That's a good question. I think to this day people ask me, "Did you sell too early?" And I don't say no straight away. It's never easy. It's never easy. The reality is, I think we were mission-driven founders. So it was not about the biggest outcome. It was about how do we best help farmers? How do we get this product to do something that we thought was really important, which is feeding the world's population. We thought this was so important. And even though we were doing pretty decently, it was clear that we weren't going to be able to do it without maybe another round of funding or two. So there was quite a bit of risk left in the business. We weren't planning on selling, but then Monsanto came over to us with this offer, and initially we said, yeah, no thank you, I think we're okay, and then they were insistent, and we had in our mind this view of Monsanto being this evil corporation, but we got to know them a little better and realized, the reality is not quite what that perception is, and they're kind of the Google in the ag tech space, and we're the ideal partner for us. So it wasn't necessity, but it was pragmatism, I'd say. So in retrospect, I think it was the right move for us to do. Of course, a couple of years later, with the funding environment of 2015, maybe we would have raised $500 million and just executed further. But whatever. I think it's a good outcome. And I didn't mention earlier, but part of the deal structure is they agreed to run us as an independent unit. Climate still retains its name, is run as a business from San Francisco, is still doing pioneering work in precision agriculture. It's just got new owners that own 100% of it, and they bought us out. And I left at that point.
And when you see the check, it lands in your bank account. Were you ever tempted at all to retire and just spend the next 35 years on the beach?
Yeah, well, I was 35, so yeah, I mean, spending age 35 to 70 at the beach sounds kind of interesting. I did take time off, and I think people should certainly do that because. You can't see the forest for the trees if you're constantly on go. So I took a bit of time off, but and I was doing angel investing and stuff. But at the same time, I felt like I was still young, and there was a lot of impact I still have on the world. And I started to get a little frustrated after a year of angel investing. So my wife, I think, would definitely not have put up with it that much longer because when you're I guess somewhat ambitious and you want to change the world and you feel like you're not, then you want to do something else. So I started to look around. The idea of starting another company obviously crossed my mind, but those first few years are quite brutal, and I just had a child, so it made sense to increase my leverage by becoming an investor. And I'm originally from the UK. I'm half English, and I realized that the Europe that I'd left in 2000 was not the Europe I'd returned to in 2013. So things were so much better, but there's still a lack of role models of people who'd been through the process who could help founders. So I ended up realizing, I can actually have a pretty decent impact as an investor. So I ended up joining Atomico, which is based out of London. Atomico was a seed investor in my company, so I knew them quite well. Obviously, I knew a lot of the other good investors as well. In the US and then a few in Europe. But the reason I picked Atomico specifically is because it's a very entrepreneurial culture. It started by Nicholas Zenstrom, who started Skype. Obviously, he's an icon in Europe for entrepreneurship, and Atomico still has very much that entrepreneurial, long-termist view, which was aligned with my view on what I want to be doing.
And what kind of companies are you interested in investing in?
So I feel extremely lucky because I'm a tech guy, so I'm a computer scientist. I was CTO and the technical co-founder of my company. I think I feel really lucky that I've become a VC at this point in time because there haven't been that many technologists in partner roles at VCs in Europe specifically. But we've got this wave of machine learning and AI coming along, and already there's several examples I can think of bad moves in buzzwords where people don't actually understand what AI is. Don't get me started on the kind of companies that are calling themselves AI companies these days. But my focus, I think, and Atomico had the foresight to bring in not just myself, but several people that are very, very heavy in tech, and ex-CTOs and ex-operators from the technical side. So we have a very good bench for assessing technical companies and infrastructure companies, computer vision companies, and of course ag tech and fintech and some of the other aspects of my business. So I've been generally spending more of my time focusing there. I'm really excited about a couple of our recent investments. So there's a computer vision company that we haven't announced yet that is, I think, going to make a big difference to logistics and the industrial space.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. But more generally speaking, I think SaaS as a business model has arrived. That's something I also spend a lot of time on, looking at SaaS companies. We made this year we've made 2 companies so far. One that we've announced is a video encoding and distribution platform based out of Austria. So these are all the general kind of areas I tend to focus on.
And has there been any company that you've seen here at SaaStock that you've been found really interesting or hadn't heard of before?
Well, I looked at the spreadsheet, so by today I kind of taken a good look at a lot of them. Now there are quite a few. So Atomico tends to do later stage investments. We don't do seed stage. There's a lot of companies that are quite compelling and we'll keep an eye on. I don't want to name specific companies because then the ones I don't name will think I didn't like them. But no, there's a lot of good companies, and we are a European fund. We believe very strongly in Europe. And we also believe that European companies should probably take European money, because when they take American money, they often get bad advice with it. American VCs can often be very myopic and say, well, you've got to move to the US, which actually might not always be the right move. In fact, hiring in the US sucks right now. It's very mercenary. You'll hire people and they'll cost an arm and a leg, and they'll leave you in a year, and that really kills your morale. So for a number of reasons, you want to stay in Europe, and as a European fund with a big belief in Europe and European companies, we are supportive of that. The fund is actually one of the biggest in Europe, so we're uniquely, I think, able to do series, not just Series A's, but B's and C's, anything up to 25 million plus invested in companies.
And have you seen Brexit having any impact at all, Siraj? I mean, do you think that that's going to impact London and its ability to attract top tech talent?
Good question. Yeah, that's come up quite a bit recently. I mean, obviously it's not great. I mean, we didn't like that it had happened, but we're in the camp that where there's change, the best people that can react to that change and find opportunities and take advantage are startups. We're much more nimble than incumbents, right? So to the extent that Brexit is going to create disruption, it's just another opportunity for startups. So it does hurt in some ways. I think fintech is going to be affected. We invest not just in London, we invest across Europe. So some of our companies will be less affected by others. But overall, we're not as negative on it as we could have been. But it's early days. We'll see. A lot of it is going to hinge on what the government does with respect to how it negotiates, the alternative to being in Europe, the way the UK had been.
Okay. Well, Siraj, Khaliq, founder, investor, and advisor, thank you for joining us at SaaStock.
Thank you. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks. Cheers.